I will use Hyper-V to create my virtual machine, and that's what I will install Windows Server 2019 on. I'm going to click on Start, and I'm just going to type Hyper, and you'll see Hyper-V Manager is in the list. The first thing I'm going to do is create a new virtual switch. So I'm going to choose this virtual switch manager here on the far right, and I'm going to choose external, which is selected by default. When I click create virtual switch, I'm going to give this a name, and I'm going to name mine vSwitch. You'll see external is selected. This gives me a list of all the network adapters on my machine. Now, the machine I'm using now only has one network adapter, and it's just an Ethernet adapter. If you are using a laptop and you have an Ethernet network adapter and you have a wireless, both will show up in this list. What you need to do is select whichever one you're actually using. So if your laptop is connected to a wireless network, then you want to make sure for this virtual switch that you choose the wireless network adapter. That is what your virtual machine will use when it needs to connect to the internet to activate and anytime it needs to access any resources. Mine is already correct, so I will just click OK. And this will tell me that the pending changes will disrupt network connectivity. I will say yes for that. That is done, so now I can create the new virtual machine. Under Actions here, I will go to New Virtual Machine. In this Before You Begin wizard, I will just click Next on the first screen. The name of the virtual machine, I will name mine RTS-DC1, and we'll just hit Next. For the generation, I will choose Generation 2. That's for newer operating systems, and we'll hit Next for that. For the startup memory, I'm going to enter 2048. That is the minimum amount we should consider. The recommended is 4096. Now, this is in megabyte form, so 4096 would be 4 gigs. 2048 megabytes is actually 2 gigs. And I will enable dynamic memory. That just allows this to consume more RAM when needed. When it's no longer needed, it'll simply release it. I'll click Next for that. On the networking, I'm going to choose that virtual switch I just created, the vSwitch. When I go down to Next, this brings up the Connect to Virtual Hard Disk. We will leave this as default. It's going to create a virtual hard drive for our virtual machine. I'll just choose Next for that. For the installation option, I'm going to click this middle option, Install an operating system from a boot image file, and I will browse to the location that you save the ISO file. Mine was saved to my desktop, so I'm going to choose that ISO file and open, and now that is attached. When I click Next, this is a summary. So the name, generation, memory, network, hard disk, operating system, you can see the path to the ISO file. All that is correct, so I will click Finish, and now my virtual machine has been successfully created. Our goal with this was to get a virtual machine created just so we can install the operating system. Hyper-V comes up in another lesson, and we cover Hyper-V in great detail in that lesson. The additional options and other configurations that show up there, now they would just prove to be confusing because there's a lot of other technology that we need to cover before we dig into the very detailed settings in Hyper-V. So now we just want this created so we can install the operating system.